Good evening. I'm Mark Weber, Curatorial Director of the Internet History Program here at CHM. On behalf of our wonderful trustees, staff, members, volunteers, and supporters, I'm thrilled to welcome each of you in person and online for this CHM Live event. The museum's mission is to decode technology, its computing past, digital present, and future impact on humanity to shape a better future. Tonight, we're excited to partner once again with NOVA to focus on a topic that's very much of the moment and the subject of their latest episode, Secrets in Your Data. My own involvement started when filmmaker Jason Sussberg contacted me because it would help find material for an earlier film on Stuart Brand. I was thrilled to help out with a super timely topic and to play Spacebore with Dr. Alok Patel. Tonight, we're first going to watch some clips from the NOVA episode to give you some background, and then we'll invite some of the featured speakers from the documentary to come on stage and take the discussion even deeper. So to get us started, I would like to introduce Chris Schmidt, co-executive producer of NOVA, who will tell you more about this project.
Thank you. Thank you. So NOVA has done, we have held several events here over the years, and as people at NOVA and some people at Computer History Museum know, in my opinion, this is objectively the best computer museum, or the best museum in the world. And I'm not joking. I can spend hours down there in those exhibits. And I was just telling Mark that, you know, I have there's some objects down there. I have kind of a muscle memory, a scent memory. You know, that 128K Mac down there, I look at that thing and I'm like, I remember prying the back of that thing off and seeing the signatures in the back. I remember the smell of the solder when I stuck on a warranty-breaking 2 megabyte RAM expansion, $1,899, shipping not included. And so I just go completely crazy when I'm down there, and I really love it. And it's kind of been my dream to accidentally get locked in the museum. But you know, with my luck, I'd go down there and run around and try to turn everything on and find out it was all just empty shells. You know, it's like if you picked up Kirk's communicator or his phaser or something, you'd be like, this thing looks so cool, but dead. Just a couple words about this film. The film really began, at NOVA, we'd been talking for quite a while about just the general idea of big data. And all the conversations about how you would make a film about it tended to go towards the bad stuff, the scary stuff. And I was never that excited about going that route. And then I was talking to a guy who's in the film named Ramesh Raskar at MIT at the Media Lab, who told me he was working on a way to use AI to make data private and secure. And I thought, oh, well, what could go wrong with that, right? But then he explained to me, and he said, you know, when you use Waze, you give your location to Waze in exchange for this information about what's going on in traffic, and you think, it's a pretty good deal. I don't feel particularly vulnerable. But in fact, you know, Waze records where you go, and if you go someplace that you don't want people to know you're going to or you went to, that data would be right there, so maybe it's not so safe. He said his idea was that instead of giving your exact GPS coordinates to Waze, what if you and every other driver gave a big fuzzy cloud location to Waze, that it covered a very large area? Using AI, you could actually derive from all those fuzzy clouds where the real traffic patterns are on the roads. And in that case, nobody would have given up any real data. And I thought, that is fascinating, and now maybe that's the way we do a show about big data, where we help the viewers understand what your data, where your data is going, where your vulnerabilities are, but not make a doom and gloom film, but kind of say, can you have your cake and eat it too? Is there a way to get the value of all that data without being compromised or at risk? And so that's kind of what the film explores. Now, I should, just before we get started and before I introduce Alok, I do want to thank a lot of people who helped make this possible. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Carlyle Companies, the Nova Science Trust with support from Margaret and Will Hurst, the George D. Smith Fund, and PBS viewers, of course. We'd also really want to thank the Computer History Museum. You guys have been amazing partners over the years. And Mark Weber and Russell Iris, you guys have been amazing. And then Jason Sussman, one of the filmmakers, is here, and David Alvarado, maybe he's watching remotely. These guys were dogged. They did an amazing job taking this amorphous idea and turning it into a really amazing story and film. We also thought when we were making the film that we wanted to have a host. And we wanted a host who was somebody that the viewers could identify with, who wasn't necessarily an expert, but was a curious person. And so we already had known from some other works this gentleman, Alok Patel, who you're going to meet in a minute. He's a physician at Stanford Children's Hospital. He's been an ABC News media contributor, a medical contributor. He's host of Secrets in Your Data. And when we asked Alok, would you like to go on a quest to find out where all your data is going? Who's got access to your data? You know, what are all the terrible things that your data is going to do for you? He said, I'm down. And then he said, that sounds a little scary. He said, I'm still down. And so with great pleasure, I would like to introduce Alok, who will get us going.
I think I'm way too excited to be up here and talking about something that I approached with a little bit of anxiety when we were talking about data privacy and me being someone who was a little bit illiterate when it came to data privacy. I'm the kind of person who will interact with the spam text messengers who try to get your data, and I'm like, do you want to get a beer? And I mess with them. All of my passwords, before I talk to Eva, who I'll introduce in a sec, were related to my favorite video game, Final Fantasy, which is all over my social media, so a hacker could probably find that out. And in general, I love sharing information. So going on this journey and sharing this moment and going on this journey as someone who is not the smartest person in the room, I'm probably the dumbest in this brilliant room, about data has been enlightening. So thank you all for being here. And I'm excited to get going about all this. I want to thank Chris for the introduction. I want to thank Mark for making suspenders cool again, because they are, sir. And without further ado from me, I want to introduce our expert, brilliant, insightful panelists who we're going to chat with. First up, we've got the all-star, Eva Galperin, who is the Director of Cybersecurity at Electronic Frontiers Foundation, where she's worked since 2007. And I love that she has a specific interest in protecting vulnerable populations, such as journalists, activists, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and victims of domestic abuse. Give it up for Eva Galperin. That pseudo-creepy garage I walked into with that amazing shot that came from the brilliance of Jason Sussberg and David Alvarado, who made the movie Magic, is actually the home of Patrick Jackson, who is the Chief Technology Officer of the privacy and security company Disconnect. And fun thing to talk to him about at the happy hour is he used to work at the National Security Agency, the NSA, where he researched in emerging mobile and wireless technologies. And we'll ask you later about that transition. Don't give us government secrets, but.
All right. Thank you.
And then last but definitely not least, because I'm pretty sure he doesn't need an introduction, is the one and only Brewster Kahle, founder and digital librarian of the Internet Archives, where there are over 145 unique petabytes, which we had to look this up. So like 1 petabyte is 1,024 terabytes. So this is a lot. I'm like, cosmic of all the, what's that? Yeah, that's right, 1 million gigabytes.
Right.
You can't even buy that hardware. Of all the books, music, television, web pages, software that basically define our internet culture. Thank you all for being here. So I like icebreakers, we're all friends. I have a good icebreaker question, which I have not told you two about, but Eva got to cheat on this. I want to know your favorite or a memorable internet game, computer game. Eva, we'll start with you.
I like a game called Crusader Kings 3, which
Specific.
combines sort of a nerd knowledge of medieval Europe with a love of management. And what I particularly love about this game is that the key to winning it is to set up a particularly brutal eugenics program.
Where are we going with this? I love it.
Games really allow you to play things out that you would absolutely never do in your everyday life. And so I get to kidnap and cannibalize the Pope. And who would not want to do that in a video game?
Listen, the voyeurism of video games, I love it. Patrick, you have to follow that.
I know. I think my favorite game was Team Fortress and for computer, and I just really liked that. You know, it was on the internet, so I could play my friends. We would be in high school, and we would know what time we would go on. We had a little clan name. I think our clan name was Tupac. You know, because we were big fans. And it was only like 3 of us, but we would dominate servers that we played on. It was a really fun game. I need to play it again, but it's been a few years.
Right on. Brewster, I want to hear.
Okay, pre-internet game, we had the Xerox Alto, which was sort of the precursor to the Mac, and they gave a pile of them to my college, and I got to play Asteroids for free, all night long. So this was kind of awesome, but that's not internet. So all right, my current internet game, all right, I'm gonna go seriously nerdy here, is fulfilling interlibrary loan requests. So you get
Kind of a game. It's kind of a game.
all right, I'm a librarian, and we're on this network, and they route these questions to us of us like, okay, I want this article out of this journal that didn't, exist in 1947, and it was like, and then you have to find it, and then you send off a PDF to some person you never met in a place you never know, and that actually, I do that for fun.
There's a spectrum of fun happening up here, which I like. My favorite game is obviously Oregon Trail, and now as a physician, I know not to treat dysentery by abandoning someone next to a river. So you can go hunting and continue. So before we even dive into anything, I want to share the results from the poll, which I'm not that surprised about. We asked you all, how protected is your online data? And 0% said very protected, which I don't think you guys participated in that poll, because you would say that 68% somewhat protected, 12% completely unprotected, 20% is where I live with I have no idea. Think I'm doing okay? Not totally positive. What's up, dude? Good to see you. If you were wondering why the audio was so amazing, anyway. So, opening question. Brewster, I want to ask you something. On your Wikipedia page, I do deep research.
Uh-oh.
You have the statement that you are an advocate of universal access to all knowledge.
Yes.
And I feel that's an incredible place to start when we're talking about data privacy and data that's out there. What does that phrase mean to you now, and how has it evolved?
So there's this dream of the internet. We sort of, a bunch of us signed up for it. For me, it was in 1980. Before there was, we still had the ARPANET. It was early days. We didn't really have computers that worked very well. But the idea of having all the published works of humankind at your fingertips, that you could go and ask questions of the Library of Congress and get good answers. This was the future we wanted to build, and we knew we could build it. We knew where AI was going to end up. We knew what the costs of the storage, all of it. We knew how much published works were in the Library of Congress and all. And we just calculated out, when would we be able to pull this off? And I just said, how hard could it be? Sure, I'll do that. And I knew that AI was being data starved, that we were basically trying to bring up these machines in 1980 with too little data. Let's go and make it so that people interact with other machines and other people on a global network. That was a dream of a lot of us. And it wasn't just us. It was Vannevar Bush in 1945 with the Memex. It was Ted Nelson that came before. And Tim Berners-Lee that came after. That we have all, how do we go and build that dream? Big data, done right.
And do you feel like access is still available for people? in the way you envision it?
No, it's gone horribly wrong. No. So we've now brought up a generation on what's on the internet because it's really easy to get access to that. But it's thin. The amounts of information are thin. We've had to go and have legions of people, all of we Wikipedians, to go and type in knowledge again because the publishers didn't put it up. Right? We basically have the libraries able to be put online, but they're not online. Or if they are, they're behind some horrible paywall or some creepy system or whatever. So no, we have not lived up to the dream and the potential of what you'd get if you had computers networked and people engaged with each other with these technologies. So we still have some work to do.
Those paywalls, which is why I think people share all the free access sites on social media to get the data out there. Patrick, I know that you going from the NSA to then working for another company in privacy was not because you lost a bet or flipped a coin. There's got to be a story there. As much as you can share, we want to hear it.
Yeah, I tell people that folks that work at like an intelligence agency like the NSA, they know the best practices online because they know how data can be easily leveraged or weaponized against you. And so when I do meet folks of software that I would use, like when I was in the government, I would go to Black Hat, which is a hacker conference, and then DEF CON, I would go there. They would do a game called Spot the Fed, but they never spotted me when I would go. But I would, I was big fans of the organizations like the EFF that I would see, and I would go to the table, and I would see other colleagues also, leaving with some of their swag because, we respected these organizations and we use these tools. The value of this data, whether it's being used to, for intelligence purposes, or if it's being used to kick in a door, or if it's being used to try to sell somebody something, it's the same data. And it really can be weaponized for all different types of purposes. But I think the NSA, like I had a great experience. I didn't work on anything that I was morally, I had issues with or anything like that. These organizations are big. And in the same way that we need to understand how, hardware, servers, apps work for even the defense of the United States, it's important. And it's not all just, hey, spy on Americans type things, which, and I think it's healthy to expect the best and to, really interrogate any institution that has immense power. And so, there are lots of fans inside the agency for organizations, Internet Archive. Like these are all very important, and it's why the internet is what it is.
So you feel your time at the NSA almost gave you that mission statement to go out and you carry that mission with you at Disconnect?
Yeah. You see firsthand the value of this data, and you talk to folks that work at the NSA, and they have the best practices online. Like that's where if you want to know the best way, to like how you should do online shopping, or what can happen when you open an email, like you'll observe them as they use their devices or the devices they don't use, and it will tell you everything you need to know. And so I would be around colleagues and I would learn things, and it wouldn't necessarily mean that, they were divulging things about what they worked on, but you just watched how they behaved online, and it would give you all the tips that you would need to know.
I'm just imagining like their cell phones are in Faraday bags. They have like Rottweilers and I don't know, but just some heightened level of security that I'm inspired by.
Yeah, it's close. You just couldn't bring them in the buildings, but yeah.
Eva, can you give us a quick overview of what EFF does, but also I'm curious about when for you the mission showed up to help defend and empower vulnerable populations?
Sure. So the Electronic Frontier Foundation is a digital civil liberties organization. We've been around since 1990, so we are as old as the web, but not as old as the internet. And we've been around long enough to know the difference. So we are sort of a superhero team of lawyers, engineers, and activists all working together to make sure that when you go online, your rights come with you. And to that effect, we file impact litigation, so lawsuits. Sometimes what we need to do is to go out and get in the streets or call your representative in the Senate or Congress about some extremely stupid new law like COSA. And sometimes the answer is tech. And I work on an engineering team that does sort of a combination of sort of creating tech for good, such as Let's Encrypt. So if any of you have ever very easily set up TLS on a website, you're welcome. Not me personally, but some people that I work with who are very nice, much smarter than I am. We also make a browser extension called Privacy Badger that eats cookies. Big fan. And in addition to that, we do a lot of security research, tracking APTs and also threats to vulnerable populations. And for me, the sort of passion for protecting people in vulnerable populations and marginalized communities really predated EFF. It was one of those things that I always cared about because I went to go work for companies in Silicon Valley, and really what I noticed was that we were building products for people like us with problems like ours, with threat models that were like ours. And when I came to work for EFF, one of the very first things that I saw was that the people whose problems were not being taken seriously were journalists. They were activists, they were dissidents, they were survivors of domestic abuse, people in LGBTQ populations, people honestly like outside of the United States and Europe, people who live in the global majority were simply not important to the people who were making these products because they weren't going to make them any money. And there are security teams all over the world that work overtime to protect the rich and the powerful. And I tried very hard to make EFF into a team of people who could be a security team for the people who can't afford a security team.
I feel like getting a microphone and like slamming it on the ground right now because that was.
I love to end everything.
I'm so hyped right now about that. That mission statement's incredible because, as you mentioned, we talk about protecting data, and the question is from who are we protecting it against? And so, before I get back to that, you don't hurt my feelings, but did you all watch the full version of this beautiful film?
Yeah, it's excellent.
And did the journey that the film take you on, do you feel like that was representative of the average person's knowledge of data privacy? In other words, someone like me who was kind of just roller coastering with the seriousness. What was your vibe?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought that it was in my company, like we have to do so much education because we've been around since 2011, and a lot of folks, they don't know how the internet works and the value of their data and the fact it's being collected without them even knowing. And I think that the film did a great job of explaining from the beginning and to like, what the current state of the internet is now, practical things that you can do to make your privacy and your security better. And then, I think it leaves with a good taste, like it's a hopeful feeling, and it's not just like, hey, it's done, we got to start over, Even though there are good efforts to kind of reimagine, those are all healthy, and that's what a healthy, internet environment where ideas are welcomed and they can be tried in public.
I promise Nova did not pay him to say that. That was organic. That was organic. We will get back to hope. First, we got to start with the doom and gloom because we got to bring the audience in, right? Eva, I don't remember growing up and using the internet and seeing these like, do you accept the cookies? I don't really remember this being a part of my early internet experience, but now I feel like every single website, it says you have cookies, accept cookies. My first question is, when did this become a thing? And also why? What advent of the internet allowed companies to say, we need to put cookies on everything because it is going to be profitable, it's going to be productive?
The cookies were there the whole time.
Great.
The cookies are not new. The questions about whether or not you accept the cookies, blame Europe. Europe passed a law called the GDPR, which requires affirmative consent from all users before a website leaves a cookie on a machine. And as a result, we now have these constant pop-ups asking us whether or not we accept cookies, usually with language that kind of implies that the site's not going to work unless you say yes, which is incredibly misleading, and that most people click through without really thinking about them at all. So on one hand, it's kind of better than nothing, but on the other hand, it isn't really that great. I think that a sort of consent-based approach to tracking, which is what Europe has kind of embraced as part of their data privacy regime, is probably not the way forward. Having said that, it is an improvement over what the US is doing, which is absolutely nothing.
But except for EFF, which I have to say, by the way, this is not just because we're on this panel, but I do have this EFF sticker that says, worst Black Mirror episode. You guys have seen that show. Why is it the worst Black Mirror episode?
Why is what the worst Black Mirror episode?
This ever on the CFF sticker.
Oh, I think we were just trying to describe probably the year 2020. But in general, one of the big arguments we have inside of EFF is how to fight dystopia. Because when you talk to people about their personal privacy and security, about how they are being tracked by corporations and then by governments, and sometimes by their exes or by strangers, by stalkers and harassers, it's really easy to give in to sort of privacy nihilism, where you go like, well, it's all out there, so why should I do anything? Why should I try? And the answer is that privacy is not dead. If privacy was dead, I wouldn't have to wake up every morning fighting government attempts to kill it. I have a lot of goddamn work to do, and so do my colleagues. And what we really need to offer is an invigorating and hopeful message that moves people to action instead of just sort of scaring them into complacency. So that's kind of what that sticker is about. Also, we like Black Mirror.
I need another microphone to slam and like start walking out right now.
That's just how I talk, just sentence slam.
Sentence slam. Bruce, I have a question. I think I speak for a lot of people when there is so much nostalgia about the early internet. And I almost feel bad that the new generation doesn't get to experience like the wonder of Encyclopedia Britannica going online and the first video game and AOL Instant Messenger, which is how we talk to our high school crushes. When did the doom and gloom happen? When did the switch happen when all of a sudden the internet turned into this data monster and we started to see the nefarious potential out there? When would the OGs of the internet, yourself, Tim Berners-Lee, half the people in this room, say that point happened?
Woo. Okay, so let's take the different eras as sort of when we sort of became conscious of these things. So I'm particularly early in this cycle, so I did a system that came before the web. It was called Waze, but it's not that Waze. But every server we put out an ethics of digital librarianship essay. It was, okay, you are running this website. Waze site, but anyway, website, you're gonna get information from people that they don't even know they're giving to you. You're gonna know people better than they know themselves. And you, because you're a digital librarian now, you're in charge of these logs, you've got to be highly ethical. And I bet only a few people read it, and I think, basically corporations made business models avoiding it, and it was, there was a real turn. So we built lots of little websites, WordPress websites, and try to blog and all these different things. But then there started to be these large-scale companies that wanted to do it all. Portals. It wasn't just a search engine that went and answered your question and directed you back. They wanted to do news, sports, shopping, flights. They wanted to know more and more and more about you. It was gold in them thar hills, that data. They may not know what it was going to be used for, but it was going to be good. And we now have publishers. Thomson Reuters, I think the publisher, now calls themselves a data analytics company. And if that doesn't frighten you, you're not paying attention. So it changed from making people happy with what it is you're offering them explicitly, to trying to mine information that you're getting from them implicitly. And that was a flip that happened, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s. We started to have computers being able to absorb that amount of data that came in the logs and started to be able to mine it. So I'd say that it's that sort of that grossness that is the spew of the cell phone tracking data. It's that stuff that you just don't know. It's the things you point out in your movie that's just so creepy.
And kind of a follow-up to that, when did companies start to realize that that data is worth billions of dollars? Can we quantify that, or did that just kind of start to organically happen?
I think they always knew this. I mean, and this is, you take the advertising business, I mean, that's a whole tracking, you don't have to just do demographics in these different areas, you can like target, right? They use military terms, your former boss, terms about like how to interact with people. I'm gonna target you. It's like, that relationship shouldn't last long. And but it's how do we go and so they were looking forward to this. They just didn't have the tools to be able to do it. And now we have this stuff just spewing out of every corner. And fortunately, there are things we can possibly do about it, but it's feeling pretty bleak. I mean, you talk to most people, they just feel like they're being run over by these massive corporations. And it's not just the front-end companies. It's these back-end companies that sometimes are obscure, and sometimes they're traditional companies, publishers, that make a business out of aggregating profiles of people, selling it to landlords, law enforcement, and border officials. Publishers. How did we get here? How did somebody go and think, I really want to do that? And I don't know, is it business school? Is that to blame? Is it the Silicon Valley style of funding things? Is that it? Is it we haven't been told we can't, therefore we're going to do as much exploitative behavior as we can? I'm not sure how did that happen? How did we end up with corporations that are this fricking big? How do we end up with billionaires? How did this happen? I'd say is some of the underlying structural problems that we've got going on that have yielded an internet that is striking people as pretty creepy.
I think what got me heated, which we had to take a couple cuts in the movie, was hearing about the way this targets medically vulnerable populations. People who have a very specific medical diagnosis or disease, all of a sudden, the data, the targeting ads come right towards them. So anyway, saddening to know that it's been evolving for 30 years, but hopefully there's some more awareness about it. What also has been evolving, Patrick, is we went from websites to apps. Yeah. Like there are some apps I have, and I don't even know what the website is. I have no idea. And I'm curious. So Eva mentioned cookies and how sometimes we just gloss over the actual wording. I don't read it. I scroll down and I say accept or decline, depends on my mood. And with apps, I'm curious about this. You mentioned in the film that these apps, have 500 kilobytes of data, which is 125 printed pages of your personal information, and all this creepy info, and how 3 apps could all of a sudden share bits about you, and all that goes to one metadata broker, and I was like in my dystopian rabbit hole going down here. My question for you, if I actually sat down and I read the terms and conditions, and I read, would they actually disclose everything that they're giving away?
It's like, it will be hit or miss. The companies that have a lot to lose, their lawyers are going to make sure their privacy policies and their privacy declarations are tight. And so like a good example is when Apple first rolled out where developers had to publicize their privacy nutrition labels. Some companies like Facebook and Google, they declared everything. They said, hey, we're gonna declare everything so there's no gotchas. There's other companies that they want to look good when you're browsing the App Store, and it says like, oh, well, it only collects this anonymous data, and then you download it, and then in reality, this app is collecting a lot more. And there's cases, Temu was a big example where, I looked into the exact data that they were collecting, and it turns out that they were collecting things that were far more sensitive and things that they didn't declare. And so a part of that investigation, like Apple actually told them, hey, you need to fix this or we're gonna stop your updates. And you know, unfortunately, like those types of companies exist where they'll do it until they get caught, and then when they get caught, they'll say, hey, you know, it was an oversight. There's no oversights when this data translates directly to money. And they'll, you know, this is their game plan. And that's why it's, you know, you have to have folks that stay on them, you know, to do the best thing on behalf of the consumer. Because if you allow them to try to rein themselves in, they will not. And they'll just say, oh, it's status quo, everybody else does this. But you have to think about, you know, as a user, you know, what has been their feedback? Are they okay with this, quote, status quo of, you know, all this data being collected? No, they aren't, because they have no idea the level of detail of the amount of data that is being collected off of their device and how that could put them in harm in the future. And, you know, you're giving away all this data right now, and you have no idea, you know, will it be used against you tomorrow, next week, 2 years from now, 10 years from now? Like, we don't know. And so you have to take things under your control as much as possible to stop that data. And it's tough. Like, you know, there may be some decisions that, you know, that you'll have to make, but you have to protect your data now, because we don't know what the future brings and how that data could be used against us.
Ooh, speaking of the future, pediatrician hat on, my patients are addicted to social media. Like, they'll be in the hospital even before going to the OR, and they're scrolling. And there was an app, it was a face aging app, if anyone saw that, where you can take a photo of your face and you can age yourself 20 years. And even with all the known security risks in the hospital, every kid just selfies and aging themselves and putting it on the internet. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know about this.
And it's kind of like the old trick of, if you make something fun, people kind of don't really think about what they're giving up. And, you know, and it's unfortunate. And these apps will exploit that and know that, you know, hey, we can dangle this nice new feature. It allows us, you know, oh, it's some heavy processing, so we have to do this on our server. So we have to collect this information, process it on our server to do this, you know, whatever face change. And you have to think about what you're giving up. Where does this data go? And you know, at least with the web, you can easily inspect the source code of the page. It may be kind of obfuscated, but the source code of the page is there. But with apps, it's really a black box, and you really almost have to be a reverse engineer or know your way around the tools to even inspect what these apps have in them. You know, what code could be awakened under certain conditions, what data they're transmitting back to their servers, who they're transmitting your data to. You have to be have some sophistication in order to do that, and it's not right. And I think that, you know, there's, you know, cookies, they're bad, but at least it's a file that you can inspect on your machine. And I'm not for cookies at all, but it's weird to think that they're transparent in the sense that you can purge them and you can view them. But when somebody's digitally fingerprinting your device, you have no idea. There's nothing that you can inspect on your machine to say, oh, here's a marker of what somebody set this here. They're just collecting enough, you know, data points about your device and you, where they can digitally fingerprint you and identify you in the future.
I promise we're going to swing to hope soon. Before everyone throws their phone in the trash like I did in that movie. Okay, so we're a hypothetical situation. I want to assume that the three of you do nothing to protect your data online, and you all have a bunch of targeted ads coming at you. Going down the line, can you tell me what the targeted ad would be?
Interlibrary loan, man.
I love it. Patrick, what about you?
You know, it probably would be like networking equipment. I'm a sucker for just always the continuous process of improving my home network. So it would probably be ads related to that.
That's not fun.
I know.
I respect it though. Eva, what about you?
Not gonna lie, clothes.
Okay.
So many clothes.
I love it. Mine is, go ahead, sorry. Mine is martial arts, and as you'll see when you all watch the full version, is video games and retro arcade games, and the targeted ads did show up while we were filming. You know, but as Matt from Crypto Harlem says, it's because they influenced me into what I was going to be talking about. They're not listening to me. So with that being said, let's pull up the results on the very fun second question, because this leads me to an important talking point. We asked you all if you prefer targeted advertisements. And I'm actually surprised by this. I'm actually surprised that 67% said no. Because I'm over here, and clearly I'm the one who's ignorant, where I'm like, if you're gonna throw me advertisements, I wanna see things about Bruce Lee, and about travel, and about the Phoenix Suns, who got swept, but that's okay, the Warriors lost too. But I wanna see those ads. Why am I wrong in saying that I want to see targeted advertisements? Or maybe I'm not wrong. Brewster, what am I missing?
Oh, it's super creepy. I mean, I don't know. Why would you want to have somebody else know enough about you to do that? And it's not like somebody. It's like some out there. It's like, nah, I think I'm going to go try to find the things. The Yellow Pages is a really good example of advertising. You go there when you want it. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Yellow Pages. It was the book, it was things. Anyway, that is my idea of good ads. Don't target me, please.
Even any thoughts about targeted advertisements?
I don't want to see ads at all.
There we
Quite
go.
simply, I'm not here for ads. Having said that, the thing about targeted advertising that really worries me is not that I might see a pair of shoes that I think are awesome, which is a tremendous danger to my wallet, but that it implies the existence of a company that knows enough about me to target me with that ad, that might therefore also be selling that information to another data broker who may be combining it with information from my web browsing or some app I'm using to get a very, very detailed vision of who I am and what I might be interested in, that they might use not to sell me awesome shoes, but to know where I am traveling to, or who I'm talking to, or what my political views are. And that's not something that I'm comfortable with, and I don't want it.
I think you bring up an important point, and that's kind of comes down to awareness, education, and what we control. Not only for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our kids, et cetera. It's empowerment. And I promise, after I went through this journey, I beefed up my own data privacy. But there is a lot of conversation right now about the government's role. And we see a lot of this when it comes to TikTok and this TikTok ban. And China has our data, and this is out there, and our children are not safe. I'm going to read a quote, and I want everyone to respond to it, okay? This is from author and poet John Perry Barlow. Relying on government to protect your privacy is like asking a peeping Tom to install your blinds. Patrick Jackson, what are your thoughts when I read that quote to you?
I think it's good. I think you should always have the ability to protect yourself, and you don't always need to rely on the government to provide all of your protection. There's you have to, you can hope that, hey, these big companies, if they break the rules, the government will sue them. Maybe they'll go out of business. But what about all those other companies that are collecting your data? You need to be able to stop them, and then you have to install, tools or change your behaviors in order to limit that amount of data. But yeah, it's a funny quote.
Brewster, do you have thoughts about the government's responsibility versus our own personal responsibility when it comes to data?
Oh, I think we're being let down by the government and our governments at this point. They're focusing on, protecting corporations mostly, and they're letting the corporations get extremely large. Starting in the 1980s, we basically just let down any kind of antitrust. And I think that's some of the real seeds of the problem. I don't think we're going to win this one without working all together. We didn't build the internet without all working together between companies, government, nonprofits, policy. We ended up with a really pretty thriving boom back in the day. And I don't think we can make real serious progress if we don't have government playing a seriously good role in helping this whole thing come about. They built the ARPANET, that became the internet. I mean, all these things sort of came out of government. They're sort of like, oh, it's government versus, I'm all for big companies. I'm for the government. It's like, nah, we have to get an ecosystem to work. We have roles to play. And technologists have roles to play. And we need to play our roles better or it's going to be pretty darn dystopian. You can't watch anything on Netflix without just being another sort of horrible future of AIs going and gobbling up the world. And so how do we go and build ourselves a better world?
I like that. I like that. It's like, how do we extract the good? You know, and maybe that's not by villainizing one specific area. Eva, you may or may not have an opinion about this. I'm not sure. We may have talked about this in the past. But do you feel like if the government does do something like ban TikTok, that will solve this major issue with data privacy as touted by certain people?
Haha, no. So, full disclosure, John Perry Barlow is one of the founders of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And there is a reason why EFF has technologists and activists and lawyers on staff. And that is because we believe very strongly that in order to secure your digital civil liberties, we need to fight in the courts, we need to fight through regulation and legislation, and we need to fight by creating the tools for people individually to protect themselves, and also to convince the companies to engage in better practices so that they simply do not collect the data in the first place, and so they cannot therefore go on and abuse it. Having said that, I don't think that a TikTok ban is going to solve our problems. I think that singling out TikTok is simply wrong-headed, in that, yes, we have a problem with apps and platforms over-collecting and abusing and sharing data, sharing that data with governments, sharing that data with data brokers, sharing that data with data brokers that then go on to sell them to other data brokers so they don't even know where that data went, which is something that Facebook has said in court about the data that they have collected. What we really need in the United States is comprehensive data privacy legislation, and it needs to apply to all of the internet and to every company, and not just TikTok.
We did.
Every time.
Every time we bring it. You know, this leads me to, we were talking about education and the onus and extracting the good from data while protecting vulnerable individuals, while protecting children. And we kind of go back towards hope in the film. We talk about smash data. And I think the analogy that everyone understands is when you use Lyft or you use GPS, for example. You have a small piece of your identity, but it's de-identified. And what we talk about in the film is you being able to use this for public health. So my question to you all, anyone can answer this, is how do we get to a place when we start to really look at the positive collectively about smashed data, about saying, like, you know what, there is doom and gloom in data. You're absolutely right. There are plenty of Netflix documentaries that are about the dangers of data and AI, but how do we start to view this from a positive lens and saying, you know what, if we collectively work together, we can actually have smashed data and we can solve huge issues in the world. I'm looking at you. If you want to start, Brewster, you can. But anyone, how do we get to that place where we get optimism?
I'll take optimism for 10. We've made some progress. And we built this damn thing, right? It was just people that built this thing. So if we can build it, we can build it differently. And let's take some of the successes. So when Tim Berners-Lee built the World Wide Web originally, encryption was illegal to use. When Vint Cerf, they thought we're going to do encrypted connections on the internet. But the United States government made encryption illegal to use. This is dumb. And they eventually undid it. But we ended up with the internet with no encryption and the World Wide Web with no encryption. And Snowden pointed out this can be really massively abused, and not just by companies, but by governments that should know better. And so there was an uprising of like, well, okay, we have some tools. We have this encryption thing. Can we go and make it so that HTTPS, which is the little S on your web browser, they used to only protect Visa card numbers. And it's like, yeah, great, right? Let's use encryption to just protect banks. It's like, that's not what that was for, at least originally for a lot of us. And there was a system to go and make HTTPS everywhere. Another win for EFF. So thank you to EFF. And the
welcome.
tremendous number of people that went through the pain in the neck of going and making it so that all of your reader in between your computer, your browser, and the web server was encrypted. So it wasn't as easy to go and find what it is you were actually typing. That's a win. Let's take a moment and say, okay, all right, now what? What do we do? How do we do the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one? So the Internet Archive goes and drops IP addresses. All right, so IP addresses go and they say where to send the packet back to. Is that personally identifiable? Boy, if you really had a reckoning in Silicon Valley and said, yes, it's personally identifiable, then we would have a lot of privacy policies saying things that are not true. And like, you would know or be able to know if you worked hard enough to go and figure out who it is that's coming to your website if you keep IP addresses. The Internet Archive tries to drop the IP addresses, and it turns out we don't need the IP addresses for doing almost anything. So we just drop it, but we're really, really rare. But then you have to trust an organization to go and do it. So can we go and make it so that your reader identity, your IP address is always obscured? And there is a system, it's called Tor. And it does work, it's just slow. And it's kind of a pain in the neck to go and set up. So is there a way that we can go and take Tor and make it everywhere, right? Or at least that same kind of thing that makes it so that there's guaranteed reader privacy. Then can you make writer privacy? Can we sort of just keep steps at a time? My friend Jeff Uboys put it, can we lock the web open? Can we make openness innate into the technology itself? Can we make the First Amendment baked into the code? And is there a way of making that work all the way around? And I'd say yes. We do have the tools to be able to pull this sort of thing off. We just need people motivated enough to work together, do the hard work, and fix the architecture. The architecture has been exploited. It was very, very simple when we started. It was too simple when we started. If you just take how the world used to work back, dial the Wayback Machine and walk back into a library, there were publishers that would go and publish things. They would sell it to individuals in libraries, and then those libraries would lend them to their communities. Right? And if the publisher goes away or the library goes away, there are other copies that are around. So that's a robust way of going and running a culture. That's not the way the web works. The web is now on one place, the NewYorkTimes.com, right? And the idea is that's the only place. And if they want to change or delete those pages, they can do that at will. So we have a centralization that we got based on a very simple architecture of the web that we need to basically take the next step from. And there's going to be lots of different areas. And let's go and celebrate those people that are making it so that all of us win out of this, and not just a few big corporations.
Beautiful. I was like, thank you for coming to your TED Talk. Thank you for coming to, thank you for having a TED Talk. I want to get to some audience questions. And the first one I'm gonna read as we're pulling up the answers to the last live poll is about how do we have our cake and eat it too at data privacy? And before I respectfully ask Eva to answer that question, I asked you all, what privacy tools do you currently use? And I'll tell you, after doing this, I use all three now. There's B-roll in the footage, and I'm in the EFF office on my laptop, and I was actually downloading 1Password after talking about how breakable my passwords are. So Eva, if you were in an elevator with someone and you're going to the 5th floor and you just have maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and they asked you, how do I have my cake and eat it too when it comes to data privacy, what would you tell them?
I would definitely tell them to start by locking down their account. So password manager and strongest version of two-factor authentication that you're comfortable with. And also, I would tell them to take their security updates and to install like uBlock Origin and Privacy Badger on their browser. in order to limit tracking in their web browser. And then I would be on the 5th floor, and I would be done.
I can tell who takes that seriously. My friend Christian, who's a programmer in the audience, has a 2FA that's like on his keychain or something. This is a thing?
Like a YubiKey or a DuoKey, yeah.
Mine's just on my cell phone, so if you steal my cell phone, you have my bank account. And here's another audience question. Are consent experiences, like what is evolving in the EU and expanding, actually enabling consumers to make choices that aren't Hobson's choices? I don't even understand this question, but who did this light up? Patrick, did this capture you?
I can touch on it. So with the consent pop-ups, like I think you have to think about the motivation behind, of course, internet users want more privacy, but then if there's laws and those laws are maybe influenced by lobbyists of these data companies, they want it to be as cumbersome as possible for you to understand even what's going on. And you go, the default button is always allow, and then you say, no, I want to customize, and any change you make, it can throw off the form. Like they have UI and UX experts to try to make this look as confusing as possible. And there needs to be a better way, and that's, so you can have the laws, but then also take the steps that you can take personally. And so like if you install a tracking blocking software, you stop the connection from even leaving your phone. And then there's another thing, like one other big takeaway that I tell folks is one of my favorite privacy features of the last few years is honestly like Apple's hide my email. And there's some other equivalents. And the idea of creating a new email for every website that you create an account on, that you can deactivate at any moment, that is not tied to any other website that you've ever visited, because these are hard identifiers. Like people have been using the same email address for 20, maybe 30 years. And so it's if you give away this email to every single website that you go on, there's a history associated with that. And so Firefox also has another relay service. The iCloud one I like because it allows you to masquerade with an @iCloud.com email domain. And that's important because it means that websites can't discriminate on you and say, oh, this is just a burner email because it looks like a regular @iCloud.com email address. And so that's like a practical thing that I try to tell folks, think of your email as an identifier that is valuable. It's the glue that connects all of these separate buckets of your data that's collected. It's a very good identifier that can tie all that together.
Now, same with your phone number.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the phone number. And a lot of folks, they don't realize you don't change your phone number pretty much ever, most people. And the phone number is another great identifier. So if you think about it in the terms of, targeting, like the same terms, anything that they can put in a search box, whether it's an email or a phone number, and that can pull back results about you, you need to think about how you can limit that. And the good news is like there's practical ways you can do that. Unfortunately, some of these do cost money, but I think it's money well spent if you can afford it to adopt, some of these, mechanisms to limit the amount of data that can be tied back to you.
By the way, if anyone sees questions and they're like, I want that one answered, upvote it. Because there's like basically winners right now in the questions, including this one. Brewster, any fun copyright or DMCA stories?
No, fun. Boy, have we gotten ourselves into a mess. So the copyright laws were extended and extended and extended. And the big thing that changed was in 1976, we went from an opt-in to an opt-out system. So it used to be, I'm old enough, you had to put a little C on things, and then you send a copy into the Library of Congress, and that was kind of a headache, so people didn't do it that much. But then in 1976, they made everything copyrighted and forever. And then they made so everything in the digital world. Then they made reading copying. I've had lawyers go and look at me right in the eye and say, "Reading is copying," and it's like, No. Come on, that's Orwell, right? You know, it's like reading is reading, copying, it's different. And they'll say that it's the same. And so we've basically pushed an enormous amount of power back into these large-scale corporations. And you know, I say it, it's like, oh, you know, isn't that going to be for the children, for the writer, for the artist, for the musician? It's like, never. Just never. It's basically these large-scale corporations. And that shift is, I think, still playing out in terms of how the power dynamic, the asymmetry that we have of whether it's money power or compute power or data power has basically made it so that normal people, us, are being just squashed. So I'd say it's only one part of the lens of how we've gotten an asymmetry of power, but we've got to get that back, because I don't know if you can live in a trustless world. You know, this sort of idea is like, well, you can never trust anybody. It's like, what a horrible way about life. So why don't we try to make things trustable? So what would be a way to try to make it so that it's trustable? And I'd say having it so people's motivations are a little clearer, that there are more people that are acting on the sense of what's right, as opposed to just, I don't know, whatever motivations we've now cooked up for people that they're optimizing for. Anyway, so copyright, I would say, is a lens on how things are going wrong. So libraries are in danger. They basically have said that there's an end of life that the big publishers have said on libraries, that they're just not allowed to own digital materials. If you can't own something, I'm not sure what that world looks like.
So before you got into the trust part, I was like, you're right, this isn't fun. But then the trust part saved it. Okay. I like that. I like that philosophy. Eva, you have a two-part question. Well, it's two different questions, but the first one's probably faster. First question says, Eva, is the necklace you wore in the film a guillotine?
It is the blade of a guillotine, yes. It's for executing tiny royalists.
That's awesome. But then here comes the question, I think, a deeper question that wins the upvote contest. The film told us about data brokers, but not much about the data buyers, except in generalizations. Are there restrictions on who buys it and or where it goes?
No. That's the shortest answer. It is actually possible for individuals to buy aggregated data, theoretically anonymized, but very easy to de-anonymize with just a few different data points about the same person. And you can do it with $100, $60. There was a journalist from 404 Media who used, I think, surely no more than $100 to buy a bunch of location data, telling him about, just giving him like a whole file of people who traveled to the local Planned Parenthood. So yeah, this is available to everyone. Congratulations, this is the scary part, not the hopey kind of trust, we're going to save the world part of the conversation. This is the we're going to scare the pants off of you conversation. And this is why we desperately need federal data privacy regulation, and we need it now.
That did scare me. What else was scary is a video went viral a couple of years ago, and someone hacked into I believe it was maybe an Alexa or a Siri and a webcam, and was talking directly to a child in her bedroom and saying, "This is Santa Claus," and laughing. And it went viral because all of a sudden parents were freaked out about those cameras in their children's rooms, Alexas, Siris, and all this stuff. So it brings me to another question. Can I trust Siri or Alexa to respect my privacy? I talk to Alexa all the time. Patrick, what's up?
It's a difficult, it's an easy question depending on, first of all, you have to think about where you're putting these devices. And, they're supposed to be programmed so they listen for wake words locally, but software is made so it can be updated. And it's like sometimes you have to think about, okay, even if this company has good intent and they're trying to respect my privacy locally, what happens when they're no longer a good company or they're compromised. And you have to think that through, and it gets a little complicated, but you can design your home networks in a way where you can have control over if it can communicate to the network and when it can, things like that. But generally, I always say limit internet-connected cameras and audio devices in your home. That being said, I do have a HomePod in my kitchen that my children love, and it's like, in those situations, you have to think about the things that you can't control. Make sure that it's always updated. They're just the same way that there are 0 days for iPhones and iPads. It's running similar or sometimes the same software on these smaller devices. You have to make sure these devices stay updated. And so, if it's something that really concerns you, I like the idea that these things have plugs. You can unplug them when you don't need them. And sometimes that physical feedback and visual feedback that it's not on is helpful. But we're also kind of now used to devices that never fully turn off. You think about your iPhone, even if your battery dies, it can still be located. And so we're almost getting used to the idea of continuously having always on devices around all the time. And it is a discomforting thought. But yeah, I think it's tough. I don't have my home littered with them. And they're all on an isolated network that I can control, and I can sniff the traffic. And that's the thing. It's like I do a lot of audits on all the things that I own. And so when I do different press stories, it's because they're products that I've used. And then, I'll be disappointed if I find like, wow, this is really sending my GPS coordinates to some data company. It's a very violating feeling. And there was a really popular app a while ago where while I was doing this data investigation, I felt really burned by this app because I had been using it and it needs location, but it was sending my location coordinates to purely a data company. And the problem about data is it never expires. Once it leaves your device, it's there forever. And with these hard identifiers, whether it's email, phone number, IP address, your home IP address probably doesn't change that often. And a lot of these apps not only will, of course, they'll collect your external IP address because you're making a network request to their servers, but in some cases they'll collect your internal, your router issued IP address. And so now they can differentiate between other people in your household who have the same public-facing IP, but they have different internal router issued IPs. And that coupled with other data that they're collecting, this is how they're building these networks of not only who are there, but who lives in this home, who also associates in this home. And you combine that with other data sources, offline record, voter record, it gets scary very quickly, And I think you have to do what you can control, and sometimes you have to play in this game, to use some of these services. Maybe you have to use digital payment because they don't accept cash. Like it's unfortunate that there's some things that are out of your control, but the things that you can control, you should try to.
On that note, there are so many audience questions we don't have time for, including things about transparent pay models, what can we do with legislation, but I think you guys gave people such amazing tools, empowerment, a realistic look at what's going on. Last question, you can only answer with one word. The future of data privacy in the next 20 years. Hope, skepticism, unclear.
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 More Nova.
More Nova, yes, that was implanted. Thank you all so much for being here. We want to bring Mark back up here. And another big, huge thank you to the Nova team, and also a massive thank you to the production team, audio, sound, cinematography, because they really helped tell the story visually and keep it engaging. I see you guys.